we actually got another ban list before the end of the year, and let's look at what is inside. I actually know what the cards are, but I just want to talk about each card in detail so I can just give my thoughts about the cards that are limited or unlimited in the ban list. So let's look at the list. So there are two cards that are limited to one, which are Mind Wipe and Disturbance Strategy. And there is one very specific reason why those two cards are being limited to one, and that is that they are limiting this card as a precautionary measure as we plan to release a card which can combine with this card in a way that may be overpowered. So what do we have in common for these two cards? So they both have effects that shuffle your opponent's hand back to the deck and then draw cards. So Mind Wipe has the effect that you activate only when your opponent has 3 or less cards in their hand. Your opponent adds their hand to the deck and then draws the same amount of cards. And then Disturbance Strategy has the same effect, but it can be activated no matter how many cards your opponent has in their hand. So both cards shuffle your opponent's hand back to the deck and then draw the same amount of cards. So where's the problem? Well, there is a very particular card in Yu-Gi-Oh! Which pairs really well with these kind of effects, which is none other than Droll and Lockbird. So if you're playing Master Duel, you've probably heard of this card. You have probably seen this card being played by your opponent before, or maybe you've played it yourself. So basically, what the card does is, when your opponent adds a card from their deck to their hand, you can discard this card from your hand, and then for the rest of the turn, your opponent cannot add cards from their deck to the hand. So what you can do is, you can wait for your opponent to add stuff from their deck to the hand, and then you can either activate Mind Wipe or Disturbance Strategy, and then chain Draw and Lockbird. And then what will happen is that a Draw and Lockbird will resolve first, and then the Disturbance Strategy or Mind Wipe will resolve to shuffle all of their cards from their hand to the deck, and then they can't draw cards because Draw and Lockbird's effect is active. So your opponent will be left with no cards in their hand. So basically, it's a 2-card combo that just removes all cards from your opponent's hand. And is that very consistent? I assume probably not, because it's still a 2-card combo with one unsearchable hand trap and 2 unsearchable quick play spells and traps. But I guess it's probably best to just limit them just in case. They probably won't see any kind of play even if they don't limit the 2 cards. People will probably still play it as a meme strategy even though if they don't limit any of the cards like Disturbance Strategy. But I guess it's just to be careful, and it's not like that these 2 cards are seeing any play right now, so probably no one cares. So yeah. And then there are 3 cards that are unlimited. And the first one is Mechlord Assembly. So this card is previously limited to 3, and now it is unlimited. So will this make a big difference? No, it absolutely will not. So the problem with Mechlords before, when they were meta, is that their skill can be used twice per duel. That means you can search Mechlord Assembly during your first turn, and during your next turn you can search Triskelion or another copy of Assembly to just do whatever you want. So you basically have a guaranteed turn 1 play and a guaranteed follow-up, just using a singular skill. And that is a bit too broken, because it's too much consistency and recovery for a single deck. So after they nerfed the skill, the deck isn't that good anymore, and no one was playing the deck anyway right now. So even if they unlimit Mechlord Assembly, nothing much will change. And even before the unlimit, it was at 3. So it isn't at 1 or at 2, it's at 3, so that just means your opponent, you cannot play limited 3 cards along with your Mechlord deck. But yeah, that doesn't do a lot anyway, so So yeah. So the deck isn't actually very popular right now, so I don't imagine after the banlist it will make much of a difference. And yeah, so basically the major problem is the skill. And as long as the skill doesn't go back to what it was, I don't think Mechlords will be as good as they were before. Okay, next card, Elegant Egotist. This card will be unlimited. Well, now that is actually a really significant change for a deck. Because there is another card that is very good in the deck, that is also limited to 2, which is Swole's Nest. So, in case you don't know what Swole's Nest does, is that it is a quick play spell that tributes a Winged Beast monster and then special summons another one from the deck with the same level as the one you tributed. So that allows you to get into your Harpie cards more consistently. So even if you don't draw your Harpie Channeler, which is your best starter, you can always just use Swole's Nest to get to your starter. And also it also acts as a way to dodge your opponent's disruption. So if your opponent activates, let's say Book of Moon, when you try to normal summon your Channeler, what you can do is chain Swole's Nest and then tribute the monster that your opponent targeted, and then get another one from the deck. And since Book of Moon only targets the one that it was already on the field at the first place, so that will just make Book of Moon useless. So when Harpies were tier 1, what Konami did is limited both Egotist and Swole's Nest to 2, so that they can't play both of them at 3 copies. They could only, what they would do is play 1 copy of Egotist and play 1 copy of Swole's Nest, because Swole's Nest is such a good card, so they will rather play 1 copy than none. But now, when Elegant Egotist is unlimited, people will probably play 2 Egotists like they were playing before, because before the balance they were playing 2 copies of Egotist. So they will probably play 2 Egotists and then 2 Swole's Nest. So that gives the deck a lot better turn 2 play, because if your opponent tries to disrupt you, you still have a way to prevent that. And not to mention that, because Econ and Tretch is both limited to 1, that means they can play 2 copies of Swole Nest, 2 copies of Egotist, and on top of that, they can still play a single copy of Tretch or Econ. So it's actually a very significant buff for Harpie decks. But is it enough for them to be meta relevant again? I think they will probably be a pretty good rogue deck, maybe possibly tier 3 even. But don't forget that they still have their skill limited, their skill nerfed, because their skill needs you to activate during turn 1 by shuffling a card from your hand to the deck. So one of the best things about the deck before, when it was tier 1, was that the field spell keeps destroying every single back row your opponent has, and when you pair it with Swole's Nest, it is very devastating, because when you normal summon a monster, you pop 1 back row, and then you Swole's Nest, and then it pops another back row, so you just keep wiping your opponent's back row. But it's a lot harder to do right now, because the skill is nerfed, so it's the same with a lot of decks, like Onomats or just Mechlords, is that it's fine if you unlimit their cards, because the main problem, which is their skill, is already nerfed in the first place. So unlimiting their cards doesn't make it that big of a difference. It's even the same for decks like Shirnu and Crystons, because even though they don't have a specific skill that they use with their deck, people still use the skill that they were using before they was nerfed is level duplication and stuff like level augmentation, which is also nerfed right now. So because you can't use those skills just whenever you want right now, you have to have your life points reduced by at least 1,000 before you can use any of the level modulation skills. So I feel like Harpies will probably still be a decent deck, maybe tier 3, as I said, but not too game breaking. Yeah. And so the last card in our list is World Legacy Clash. This card was limited to 2, and now it is unlimited. And the reason given is this card will be unlimited as the power level is acceptable in the current metagame, which I totally agree. I think this card should be unlimited a long time ago because this card wasn't really played anymore. It was released back in the Black Rose Dragon box, which is a very long time ago, before even Crystons were released. So it is a really old card. It was quite good before because it helps you dodge targeting effects, and back then it is battle related effects are still pretty decent because World Legacy Clash lets you reduce your opponent's monster's attack to 0. So what people will do with this card when it was legal when it was unlimited is that when your opponent attacks your monsters, you can just use the World Legacy Clash, make the monster attack 0, and since it activates in the damage step, your opponent doesn't have a chance to redirect their attacks or cancel their attack. So the attack will go through, and then you can destroy their monster and then deal a bunch of damage. And also, if you don't want, if you want to negate your opponent's attack, what you can do is that you can banish the attacking target. So if your opponent attacks one of your monsters, you can banish the monster that your opponent targeted for the attack. And since it activates during the damage step, it actually cancels the attack because your opponent doesn't have a chance to choose another attacking target. So essentially, you can just stop the attack and then reduce another monster's attack to 0, or just reduce their monster's attack, not to 0, just depending on the monster you banish. So reduce another monster's attack, and then now you basically stop 2 attacks, and also permanently reduce your opponent's monster's attack because this attack and defense decrease is permanent. So this was how this card was played back in the day. It also used when your opponent tries to target your boss monsters. You can just always banish it and then protect it for until the end of the turn, until it comes back. But realistically, in today's meta, because this card doesn't actually disrupt your opponent's combos, it only lowers your opponent's monster's attack. So I don't think it will make a lot of the difference. It is a pretty unimpressive card in today's standards. You would much rather play other cards that actually remove your opponent's monsters or just disrupt your opponent's combos. Just any sort of modern trap, stable trap, or quick play spell like Book of Moon, MS Team. Those actually get rid of your opponent's cards instead of just lowering their attack. So what this means is, while this card is unlimited, a lot of free-to-play players that don't have access to more expensive staples can actually play this card at 3 copies, which is pretty nice. Because while this card isn't very good, it is still decent for lower ranks when decks are less competitive and more free-to-play players that don't have access to expensive staples can use this card instead. And I still think that I will be using this card for a lot of my future decks because it is no longer limited. So I think for me personally, I won't use this card in my own decks that I used to play in ranked and stuff like that, but I will use this card on my free-to-play decks that I post in my videos because it is still a pretty good card to use as a budget staple option. So yeah, it's probably a good replacement for Econ because before Econ is limited to 1, I play Econ in basically every single deck that I post on YouTube, and now that position will probably be given to World Legacy Clash. So yeah, that's the end of the list. It's not a big ban list. It's just a few preemptive limits because they're gonna release Duel and Lockbird, and some unlimits, because now these decks are a lot less good than they were before. But I think the biggest meta impact for the list is definitely Harpies, because Egotist being unlimited is a pretty significant unlimit. So I am interested to see how the meta goes. And I will not be surprised if Harpies get into tier 3 or just see competitive play, because yeah, I do think the deck has quite a bit of potential. So that is the end of the Banlist review, and thanks for watching, goodbye.